The Ahmed Yusuf family was known far and wide. Their riches were beyond imagination. Mansions stretched over the hills, fleets of the finest cars lined their driveways, and they threw the most extravagant parties that made others feel small. People admired their wealth. Some envied them, but many feared them. No one dared speak ill of them, for they held power not only in their riches, but in influence. Even the thought of the children they would someday have became a common boast in the town. The Ahmed Yusuf descendants would never know poverty, people would say with certainty. But beneath their gold exterior lay rot. While they had money and power, compassion was a foreign concept. They looked down on those less fortunate, treating their wealth as an entitlement rather than a blessing. The sons, Musa, Karim, and Sadiq, were notorious for their cruelty. They took what they wanted, especially from those too weak to fight back. Young girls from poor families became their victims, and anyone who dared to speak up met a quick and merciless end. Musa, the eldest, was particularly cruel, with a snare that could chill bones. He walked the streets with arrogance, as though the world owed him respect, simply because of his last name. It was on one such day, under the scorching sun, that fate began to turn. Musa, dressed in a crisp white agbada, walked through the marketplace. His nose turned up at the sight of the common folk. People scattered as he approached. Then, without warning, an old beggar hobbled in front of him, extending a wrinkled hand. "Spare me some change, my son," the beggar asked in a low, cracked voice. Musa halted, his face twisting into disgust. "You dare beg from me?" he spat. Without waiting for a response, he drew back and spat directly onto the beggar's face. The crowd gasped, their eyes wide with horror, but no one moved. The beggar did nothing to wipe the spit off. Instead, he looked directly into Musa's eyes, holding his gaze for what felt like eternity. There was no curse spoken aloud, no words of condemnation, but something about the beggar's stare made Musa feel uneasy. He turned and hurried away, shaking off the strange feeling that clung to him. That night, as the family retired to their lavish home, something strange lingered in the air. Musa couldn't shake the image of the beggar's eyes. They had said nothing, yet they spoke so much. But he dismissed it as foolishness. The mansion was silent as everyone drifted into a deep sleep. Hours passed peacefully until suddenly they awoke, not in their beds, but in a place unfamiliar, terrifying and miserable. The family found themselves huddled together in an old abandoned building. The stench of rot filled the air, and the walls were damp with mildew. The grandeur of their home was replaced by peeling walls, broken windows, and the faint sound of ghostly whispers in the distance. "Where are we?" Karim asked, his voice trembling. His usual arrogance was gone, replaced with fear. "I don't know," Musa snapped. but even his voice was unsteady. He tried to appear strong, but his hands shook. The room was cold and dark, and the sense of despair was overwhelming. They tried to leave the building, but every door led them back to the same room. Panic set in as they realized they were trapped. The sounds outside grew louder, scratching, growling, voices whispering their names. What is happening? Layla cried out, clutching her husband. Where is this place? Just as the tension reached its peak, a deep booming voice echoed through the building, making their hearts race. This is your new fate, it said. There is no going back. The family screamed, running in different directions, searching for a way out. But the voice repeated louder this time. No going back. Days passed, or at least what felt like days. They were starving, thirsty and terrified. There was no food, no water. The once proud family that had people waiting on them, hand and foot, now scavenged like rats, fighting over crumbs they found in the corners of the filthy room. The days turned into weeks. At least, that's what it felt like in that dark, suffocating room. Each day was a cycle of suffering, hunger gnawing at their stomachs, the icy air biting into their skin, and the constant dread of those unseen eyes watching them from the shadows. They were tormented by the whispers. The voices that mocked them called their names and spoke of their sins. But it wasn't just the voices. It was the nightmares they experienced every time they shut their eyes. When they did sleep, they woke up screaming, their minds plagued by haunting visions of those they had wronged. Musa, who had always led the charge with arrogance, now appeared haggard and fearful. His confident stance had crumbled under the weight of guilt and terror. The family had no mirrors, but if they did, they would have barely recognized the reflection staring back. One day, while they sat in the corner of the room, too exhausted to even bicker, Sadiq started whispering something incoherent. His eyes had a distant, haunted look. Layla approached him cautiously. Sadiq, she called softly, her voice trembling. Do you hear it, Mama? He muttered, his eyes darting around. It's the cries of all those people we hurt. They are here, Mama, and they're never going to let us leave. Musa, the eldest, lost his temper. Shut up, Sadiq. You are going mad, he shouted. But his voice lacked the authority it once held. It was thin, frail, like a man holding onto the last threads of sanity. But Sadiq was not deterred. I can hear them, he insisted. They are coming for us. That night, the whispers intensified. They were louder, clearer, and for the first time, the family could distinctly hear the names being called. Karim, Layla, Ahmed. The sound of footsteps approached their room, stopping just outside the door. They waited, holding their breath, expecting the door to burst open. Nothing, just silence. Then the voice returned, deeper and more chilling than before. This is your new fate, Ahmed Yusuf. You built your kingdom on the suffering of others. Now, you will know suffering, and there is no going back. Karim broke down, sobbing hysterically. He had always hidden behind Musa's shadow, following his elder brother's lead. But now, all his arrogance had washed away, leaving only raw fear. "I'm sorry," he cried out. "We didn't know. We didn't mean it." Layla clutched her husband tightly. Ahmed, usually so composed and dominant, was now trembling like a child. "What do we do? What do we do?" she whispered to him, her voice laced with desperation. "We have to find a way out," Ahmed muttered, but even he didn't believe his own words. They had tried every door, every window, but each attempt only brought them back to that same cursed room. Time blurred, and the family's once iron bond began to crack. The hunger, the fear, the hopelessness, it all wore them down. Sadiq became withdrawn, murmuring to himself. Karim refused to speak at all, merely staring at the walls as if in a trance. Ahmed tried to rally them, but his voice held no authority anymore. Even Musa, their fearless leader, was losing his sanity, jumping at every creak and whisper in the dark. One evening, while they huddled in the corner, trying to sleep, Musa heard a distinct knock on the door. He shut up, his heart racing. "Did you hear that?" he asked, his voice trembling. Karim nodded slowly, his eyes wide. "It's the beggar," he whispered. "He's come for us." "No," Musa shouted, but it was clear he didn't believe his own denial. The knocking continued, louder, more insistent. It seemed to reverberate through their bones, filling them with a deep, primal fear. Layla clung to her husband, her hands shaking. "It's all because of that old man," she sobbed. "We should have helped him." Ahmed closed his eyes, tears streaming down his face. The weight of their actions was crushing him, suffocating him. He knew they had been wrong. Deep down, they all did. But now, it was too late. Or was it? In a moment of desperation, Musa grabbed a piece of broken wood from the floor and approached the door. "I won't let you take us," he shouted. His voice echoed through the empty halls, but the door didn't open. Instead, the voice returned, quiet and cold. "You cannot escape what you have done." Musa's grip loosened, the piece of wood falling from his hand. The family was left paralyzed, the realization sinking in. They were trapped, and no amount of strength or wealth could free them. As the days passed, the family slowly lost their resolve. They stopped trying to escape, stopped fighting. They accepted their fate with resignation. They were no longer the proud, untouchable Ahmed Yusuf family. They were broken, humbled, and remorseful. Then, in the silence, the voice returned one final time. "Now you understand suffering." The room fell silent, and for the first time in what felt like forever, the whispers stopped. The footsteps ceased. There was only silence, deep, suffocating silence. Until one morning, they all woke up in their beds, The soft sheets, the luxurious room, the familiar scent of home. It was as though nothing had happened. Yet, each of them remembered every horrifying detail of the nightmare that had felt all too real. The family never spoke of the nightmare, but they all knew it was more than just a dream. It was a warning, a second chance to change their ways. The Ahmed Yusuf family no longer walked with arrogance. They no longer mistreated the less fortunate. They had been humbled by their experience, and the scars of their terror stayed with them forever. But in the quiet of the night, when everything was still, they could still hear the echoes of that voice, whispering in the dark, reminding them of the price of their sins.